So it's been a hot second or two since we've been able to, recruit some very willing and excitable test pilots to test out new hardware. And so far, this particular mission, our Crew Demo 2 mission, has been going spectacularly. Everything's still looking nominal with Dragon, as Bob and Doug are working towards their pre-sleep routine.
Yeah, just getting ready for bed, kind of like we do here on Earth. I will tell you a fun fact about when astronauts brush their teeth in space. They can use edible toothpaste because they don't have a sink, and
Of
so
course, they can't spit,
actually have edible toothpaste that if they want to, they can just swallow the toothpaste. They can also spit it out if they need to, but just a fun space fact.
Yeah, it's always really interesting to compare what normal life is like on Earth to what life in space is like. And something that continues to fascinate me is the fact that a lot of the work that's being done on the International Space Station, a lot of the research, the experiments, it's not all focused just on exploring outer space. A lot of it is actually focused on making life better for us Earthbound humans as well. Whenever I try to educate people about what is going on in the space, and I like to use the analogy of eye pressure. So standing on planet Earth, we have gravity, and there is gravity pulling your fluids down towards your feet. But in space, there is not gravity, so those fluids in your body have an opportunity to reach an equilibrium, which basically means that you might have a little bit more pressure in your head because your fluids, your blood is not being pulled down towards your feet. And so that means that a little bit of increased pressure might change the shape of your eyeball in space, which means that your vision changes. And that might seem kind of a stretch, but when you think about patients in hospitals or long-term care facilities that are unable to get out of bed, they definitely incur some of the same symptoms there because their fluids reach an equilibrium as they're laying down all the time. So really the research that's just one example of some of the research that's done on vision changes due to fluid pressure in the cranial in your brain, how that impacts your eye vision, and the fact that is 100% applicable to people on Earth. I think that's super cool, and we have so many exciting opportunities to continue to do science that is not just focused on exploring outer space, but helping those of us down here that, like I said before, I don't like G-forces, so I'm probably going to stay on Earth, and I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah, there are so many, and that's one thing, like you said, I love to tell people about because I don't think that they understand just all of the research that is being done on the space station and how it benefits us. And even through the years, we can look at the technologies that have been developed based on space travel and the things that we've accomplished so far. But you talking about, bedridden patients made me think also about exercise. And so the crew has to exercise when they're on the space station almost 2 hours every day.
Every day.
Yeah, and so bringing that kind of knowledge back down to maybe even physical therapists, other people who have to work with those who need that sort of help, and that's able to fuel some decisions sort of like that.
Yeah, and that 2-hour workout schedule is not by choice. They have to do it because the lack of gravity in low Earth orbit means that their muscles might weaken and their bones might lose some density, and it's exercise and nutrition and sleep that allows them to keep their bodies in tip-top shape throughout the entire duration of their mission. We've had a couple of lucky astronauts that have been on station for nearly a year, and that's a long time to be without gravity, and so definitely making sure that you have plenty of exercise in your routine is not an option, but certainly a must for folks up on station.
Yeah, it also helps us think about longer
to things sooner than later, so they've been on the earlier schedule, and so they'll basically have about an hour to wind down and mentally and physically prepare to drift off to sleep. Like I've said before, we really want them to be well rested whenever it comes time to begin the integrated operations for docking. And so it's really critical that they get the full, at least as much of the 8 hours as possible to be rested. And that's part of the reason why we've been talking about these 5 major burns that Dragon performs. We've done 3 of them, and then we don't have to perform the next one until after the crew will wake up. So, because again, we don't want to wake them up. It can be pretty loud.
Yeah, it should be a pretty nice night. I mean, I wouldn't mind some white noise or something in the Crew Dragon, but yeah, it's hopefully a silent night here on Earth too. Looking to continue this nominal mission. Everything looking good so far with Crew Dragon.
Dragon, SpaceX, com check.
SpaceX Dragon, we've got you loud and clear.
We've got you the same. We had some weird noises down here, so just want to make sure we were still with you.
Copy.
So we're about to hit the 4-hour and 20-minute mark here on our Demo 2 mission. And just in case if you're joining us, we have a little replay that we want to show you. Bob and Doug gave us a tour of their capsule just a little bit ago, so we would like to show that to you again in case if you missed it before.
Well, everyone, welcome aboard Dragon. My name is Doug. Next to me is Bob. You probably know him. We're so glad to be with you this evening and welcome you on board Dragon. Got a couple things we want to talk about first before we kind of show you around. The first is kind of a tradition we've had over the years with spacecraft going way back to the Mercury era. And then a tradition that's been carried on ever since with all our space vehicles, including the Soyuz. We're given the honor to name this capsule. I know most of you at SpaceX especially know it as Capsule 206, but I think all of us thought that we could maybe do a little bit better than that. So without further ado, we would like to welcome you aboard Capsule Endeavour. We chose Endeavour for a few reasons. One, because of this incredible endeavor NASA, SpaceX, and the United States has been on since the end of the shuttle program back in 2011. The other reason we named it Endeavour is a little more personal to Bob and I. We both had our first flights on Shuttle Endeavour, and it just meant so much to us to carry on that name. That's what we decided to go with. So we hope you enjoy that name, and once again, welcome on board.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome aboard Endeavour, the SpaceX vehicle headed to the International Space Station. Today, we accomplished the first flight off the Florida coast in quite some time, and Doug and I were really proud to have an opportunity to be a part of that. We're doing it in a brand new spaceship, a spaceship that's a lot different than its namesake Endeavour, the space shuttle, in that it has touch display screens that allow us to accomplish most of the interfacing requirements that we have. We'll have Doug pans over and points at the display in front of me. You can see the forward view that we had during the maneuvers that we most recently did. You can look out the window. It looks like the centerline camera doesn't have a lot of content on it now. We're kind of pointed into space so that the windows can see the Earth below us. But we've got the capability to interface with the vehicle, and it's kind of interesting. There's a command. This little button over here is actually what the commands are for our displays. One thing that does get lost is there is a extensive button panel down below as well. So over on this side, we can turn the displays on and off, as well as send some commands for some contingency situations. On the other side, we have the ability to deploy chutes and things like that on entry. So we do have some buttons, but the primary interface is these displays. So nice, new, modern cockpit that we've got for our compared to our namesake, the Space Shuttle Endeavour. I'm going to migrate a little bit away from our seats here, and Doug from his seat is going to continue to try to follow me so you can tell what can be seen from the seat that he sits in. So from his seat, when he is in the vehicle, strapped in, this is what his view actually looks like. You can see a window off to the one side. We each have a window that we can view out and see what's going on outside. That was exciting on ascent for us to be able to see the arm rotate away from the pad, and that's when we both, I think, knew that we were going to launch today. So that was super cool. I've got one on my side as well. The hatch that we came in is the hatch that's right behind me. It is a little bit of a tight quarters, but I'm going to try to demonstrate some of the capability that we have now that we're in zero gravity. So I think I was requested to do a backflip. I'm going to kind of do a side spin, which is a little bit of a permutation on that request. So hopefully you can see what it's like to actually float in zero gravity. And Doug and I are super excited that we got the opportunity to do this again today, even before the end of May. So that was super cool. We did. It turns out end up with one stowaway on board our vehicle when we launched today. It was not just Doug and I who accomplished the launch here. We do have an Apatosaurus aboard. We both have two boys who are super interested in dinosaurs. And we collected up all the dinosaurs between the two houses, and Trimmer, the Apatosaurus, got the vote from the boys to make the trip into space today with us. And so that was a super cool thing for us to get a chance to do for both of our sons, who I hope are super excited to see their toys floating around with us on board. I'm sure they would rather be here given the opportunity, but hopefully they're proud of this as well.
Okay, as we work our way towards one of the windows, unfortunately it's getting a little bit dark, but I don't know if Bob can pan over here. We just passed off of the coast of Newfoundland, and we're headed over to over the Atlantic right now. I don't know if you can get a good picture of that. Anyway, hopefully you enjoy that view as we pass over the Atlantic. And I think with that, we will work ourselves back into the seats and wrap things up for this evening.
So Doug's there making a nice big smile for the camera. I hope you enjoyed the trip today with us on board the Dragon capsule Endeavour with our friend Trimmer, the Apatosaurus, and Doug and I. We just would like to thank SpaceX, we'd like to thank NASA, and we'd like to thank the American people for the opportunity today. And we're really proud of the entire team that was able to accomplish human space flight again from the Florida coast. Just a wonderful experience. Doug and I are just so proud to be a part of it, and just want to thank everybody who gave us this opportunity and worked so hard to make this happen today.
So with that, I think it'll be good night from Capsule Endeavour. Good night to everyone at NASA, at SpaceX, and the United States, and congratulations to the teams that got us into orbit. And we're looking forward to seeing Chris Cassidy and his Russian colleagues on board the International Space Station tomorrow morning.
I don't know about you, Leah, but I will probably be able to watch that tour of Crew Dragon many, many times. Seeing it.
Dragon, this is SpaceX MD. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. Have a good night.
That was outstanding, Chris. Great to talk to you.
And Doug, last but not least, Mike will be waking you up. So bid you adieu and good night. We'll see you on station.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, so there we heard some very entertaining back and forth between Dragon Corps here in Mission Control in Hawthorne and Bob and Doug as they were getting their goodnight lullaby. And basically what we heard there was our control team here in Hawthorne saying, hey guys, we're gonna let y'all sleep. We're gonna make sure that nobody calls out anything unnecessary while you're trying to sleep. But we did hear that there was a little bit of an update to the timing of the transfer burn. So we did hear that that will actually take place while they are sleeping, but we gave them the heads up that, hey, it's only going to last 30 seconds, and we will not give you the call out, or as in the Dragon Corps member will not give the call out that it was nominal, just because we want you guys to keep sleeping. So unfortunately, we weren't able to keep that out of their sleep, but sometimes that happens. But they are now aware of it and very prepared. So at this point, they are entering what is known as pre-sleep. It's basically free time, about an hour, for them to do whatever they want as they prepare to go to bed.
Yeah, and so I think also on board there are some window covers. It would be hard to want to cover up that amazing view, but we do circle the Earth about 16 times a day. So you're seeing 16 sunrises and sunsets, and I think that would be pretty confusing to your circadian rhythm.
Absolutely.
And so they have the opportunity to, put some shades on the windows and get some real darkness in the cabin.
Yeah, absolutely. That frequent orbiting around Earth provides lots of opportunities for great views, but as you might imagine, those constant sunsets and sunrises would certainly be disturbing to a sleep routine. And, we really want them to have as much, get as close to 8 hours of sleep as possible. So minimizing the opportunity for distractions or for things that might force them to wake up is what we're trying to avoid there. So yeah, I could definitely imagine that some blackout curtains on board Dragon would be absolutely necessary. Unless if they maybe had face masks. I wouldn't mind if an eye mask, NASA eye mask with, one eye is the meatball, the other one is the worm. I could see it.
We've got to please both crowds.
Exactly.
There was a little bit of a war going on earlier today
Yep.
between the worm and the meatball.
Already stated my proud support of Team Worm. However, I did see that Leland sent out a photo on Instagram earlier that was the worm ball.
Yes, I saw that too. I love both. I think I'm proud to wear both.
Yeah,
so we've got both on my jacket too. We're well covered with NASA insignia.
Yeah, for sure. So like we said, Bob and Doug are entering pre-sleep. We won't be hearing from them anymore until it is time for them to wake up. We have just passed the 4 hour and 30 minute mark, so we're now at 4 hours and 32 minutes. So again, this journey that they are taking to the International Space Station will span over 19 hours. We will be here live providing coverage throughout that entire time. So if you want to go take a nap, that's totally cool. Be sure to tune back in when you wake up, because Bob and Doug might be waking up as well. But we will be here throughout the evening. Of course, we have friends in other parts of the country, or excuse me, the other parts of the world. If you're British, or if you're German, or if you're Japanese, different times of day, everyone's waking up. And I think that's something really cool about this particular broadcast, is that everyone in the world at some point in their day will be awake for the Demo 2 mission and tuning in. So on that note, let's do a little bit of a mission recap.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, launch day started early today. Preparations beginning for our crew members about 4 hours prior to their launch. The crew completed their final medical checks before joining the SpaceX team to get into their spacesuits. After the suit up in the NASA operations and checkout building, the crew walked out. We saw it walking out those famous 2 doors and waved goodbye to their family, and we saw some virtual or air hugs.
Air hugs.
Oh, it just gets me.
That was so heart-wrenching.
Gets me every time. So we saw some of that too as they said farewell to their family outside. The next destination for the crew was the launch pad. They boarded their Teslas, and it took about 20 minutes for them to get to pad 39A, where the Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon spacecraft were waiting for them. And this morning we woke up and thought it would be a 50% no-go day, and it just ended up being beautiful.
Honestly,
for Bob and Doug.
I was trying to not get my hopes up again, because it was really hard to turn around on Wednesday and say, okay, we're not going to space today. And so it wasn't until like T-minus 15 minutes that I suddenly realized, okay, like we're going for it. And then I let myself jump back into the excitement. But I feel like I was pretty calm most of the day.
No, I think I was too. I definitely got swept up in on
Yeah.
Wednesday. And so today, after we hit, like you said, that 15-minute mark and where things had kind of cut off on Wednesday, I was like, oh yeah,
I
this
definitely
is the real
cried way
deal.
less today than I did Wednesday.
So the crew got to the launch pad, and about 2.5 hours before launch, they ingressed or entered the Crew Dragon spacecraft. Walking over that crew access arm, they were getting some pretty amazing views out of the windows at Florida's Space Coast. And then they headed into the White Room and the vehicle itself. 40-minute crew access arm retracted, and a few minutes later, at T-minus 35 minutes before liftoff, the launch escape system was armed, allowing the Crew Dragon to escape the Falcon 9 on the launch pad or upon ascent. Should there be any anomaly, which we didn't see today, we saw a smooth ride into orbit. It was a beautiful launch. So with 35 minutes to go until launch, propellant loading began, filling the fuel tanks for those 9 Merlin M1D engines. And then just 5 minutes before launch, Dragon entered terminal count, meaning its onboard computers took control of the vehicle.
At 3:22 p.m. Eastern, 12:22 p.m. Pacific, those 9 Merlin M1D engines ignited, and Falcon 9 lifted off from Space Launch Complex 39A, ending a 9-year hiatus from human spaceflight at the historic Apollo 11 launch pad. With Falcon 9 first stage at full power, Bob and Doug began their journey to the International Space Station. Just after the T+9 minute mark, the first stage landed on the autonomous spaceport drone ship, which was stationed out in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, a couple minutes after that, we had payload separation, and that's when we finally saw Dragon flying free. Dragon executed later on the phase burn, which was the first of 5 major burns required to raise Dragon's orbit in its chase to the International Space Station. Around T+1 hour and 30 minutes, the crew completed the far-field manual flight test. Dragon is fully autonomous, so basically the spacecraft does all of the navigating and burns to get to station. That far-field manual flight test allowed the crew to test the systems that would allow them to override Dragon's computers and maneuver manually should they ever need to take control.
After the flight test, the Dragon spacecraft executed the boost burn. The boost burn raised Dragon's apogee, or the highest point of its orbit, to just 10 kilometers lower than the space station. This was the second of those 5 major burns that are propelling Dragon on its mission, and it lasted about 7.5 minutes. The third of the major burns occurred about 45 minutes later. That's the close co-elliptic burn. The firing of the Draco thrusters lasted just under 10 minutes and placed Dragon on an orbit roughly co-elliptic with the space station. This means Dragon is now maintaining that 10-kilometer orbit below station rather than just reaching it at the apogee.
Yeah, so we've had a super exciting day already. More to come, certainly. The journey to the International Space Station has just begun, like we've said over and over again at this point. 19 hours Bob and Doug have on their mission, or excuse me, on their journey chasing down the station. And, we talked about long car rides before and being in confined spaces. This would definitely qualify as an epic ride of some sort, not a car ride, but I guess spaceship ride, and that's part of just getting to space. Is in this case, we only have 2 astronauts on board Crew Dragon today, but in the future we will have 4. So I suspect their ability to do backflips, as we saw in that little tour of Dragon, might be a little bit more limited.
They'll get every opportunity once they get to the space station.
That is true. That is very true.
And hopefully that 8 hours of sleep, if they're able to sleep. I might be too excited. I know I would be too excited after a day like that. But hopefully that'll help them pass some of the 19 hours, and then you wake up and you're practically there, right?
Exactly.
So we took a look at everything that happened today, but once the crew wakes up in the morning, we'll have a number of events that will eventually lead to the docking, targeted for 7:29 a.m. Pacific. However, there are still a couple of milestones to occur while the Crew Dragon crew is still asleep. The first of those is actually the space station crew will wake up. Currently on board the station is NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy and Roscosmos cosmonauts Anatoly Ivanishin and Ivan Wagner. About 30 minutes after the space station crew wakes up, Dragon itself will perform the fourth maneuver known as the transfer burn. This is where we're raising Dragon's apogee, or the highest point of its orbit, to just 2.5 kilometers below the station.
About 15 minutes after the close co-elliptic burn completes, it'll be time for our two dads in space to wake on up. They've chosen a particular song to be played as their wake-up anthem. We don't know what it is just yet, so be sure to tune in here on our webcast in a few hours, about 8 hours now, in order to hear it first. We round everything out with a final co-elliptic burn to once again maintain the constant orbit beneath the station. This time it'll be at just 2.5 kilometers below. And then we'll get into the approach initiation and final stages of Dragon's rendezvous with the space station. Now this is really excited because when we get into those integrated operations, we transfer control from Mission Control Center here in Hawthorne over to Houston. So that team that switch over, those teams will transition to integrated operations roughly 45 minutes prior to approach initiation.
Yeah, and so during that approach, SpaceX flight controllers will work in tandem with the NASA team in Houston, as you mentioned, to activate and test out a number of systems on Dragon, including bidirectional communications with the station using the C2V2 system, which stands for Common Communications for Visiting Vehicles. And that also sets up a data stream from Dragon to the station, giving another path for Dragon telemetry to come to the ground and giving an additional command capability to astronauts on the station. They'll also maneuver Dragon to the proper altitude and initialize the navigation sensors used for the methodical approach to station.
At approximately 5:27 a.m. Pacific, Draco thrusters on Dragon will fire for the approach initiation burn when Dragon is about 2.5 kilometers below station and just about 7 kilometers behind it. So at this point, they're getting close. I would say they're probably visible from the station at that point, like
yes,
making eye contact.
I would think so.
Yeah. And at that point, that maneuver will swing Dragon up until it is about 400 meters or a quarter mile directly below the station. This maneuver will also move Dragon inside one of two checkpoints around the station that requires a set of go, no-go polls with the different control teams. The first checkpoint is called the approach ellipsoid, or as you might hear it called, the AE. The AE is an imaginary shape measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers, essentially a three-dimensional oval. Before Dragon is given permission to move anywhere near that shape or inside of it, inside the ellipsoid, the capsule is configured to be on what is known as a 24-hour safe trajectory. That means that if Dragon lost all control to its thrusters for some reason, that it would be at least 24 hours before its trajectory would move inside the approach ellipsoid.
And so at 6:03 a.m. Pacific time, we'll be looking for Dragon to get the go to move inside the keep out sphere. That's another imaginary checkpoint that consists of an imaginary sphere around station with a radius of 200 meters, so about half of a lap around a track. Flight controllers use this to monitor all arriving and departing vehicles. It's another chance to confirm all of the guidance, navigation, and control systems are working correctly on Dragon before moving closer to the station. It has the similar requirement on the orbital trajectory that if Dragon were to somehow lose control of its thrusters, it and the space station would be safe for 4 orbits, or about 6 hours, rather than the 24 hours required to enter the approach ellipsoid. Once Dragon arrives at 400 meters below station, it'll reach what is known as waypoint 0, and that'll be the first checkpoint during our approach. The vehicle can hold here at 400 meters, but if all of its systems check out, it can continue the approach to waypoint 1.
Dragon's move from waypoint 0 to waypoint 1 will swing it up and then out in front of the station, pausing at a distance of approximately 220 meters. At this point, it will be on what we call the docking axis, which essentially means that it is directly in front of the docking port. Bob and Doug are headed to the forwardmost port on the station, the Node 2 forward port. That's where Dragon docked just over a year ago on the Demo 1 mission, and is where one of 2 international docking adapters is located, and which was installed for these new commercial spacecraft flights, as well as any other future spacecraft that will use the international docking standard.
So before moving into the final waypoint, which is waypoint 2, the crew will execute another manual flight test like we saw earlier in the day, but this time in what we consider the near field, which just means it's close to the station. The crew will command a hold at 220 meters and then conduct a series of maneuvers. First, they'll fly Dragon to the center line of the docking approach, precisely lining it up with the International Docking Adapter. Then they'll do a number of what are called translational maneuvers, using the Draco thrusters on Dragon to move it along the different axes, checking in with the ground on how much propellant is used. Of course, Dragon is designed to be fully autonomous, so this is to demonstrate Dragon's ability to perform controlled maneuvers like braking and even retreating, as well as to determine position and velocity relative to the station. And once that's complete, they will transition control back over to the Dragon flight computer to resume automated docking. After the flight test is complete, teams in Hawthorne here and in Houston will do a quick go, no-go to resume the approach and then start to move in toward waypoint 2. Once Dragon starts moving in, they will do a final go, no-go for docking.
Now, once Dragon is only 20 meters away at waypoint 2, the spacecraft then focuses on aligning its docking system with the International Docking Adapter. We may hear the call-out CHOP, or CHOP, which stands for Crew Hands-Off Point, and that'll happen a little less than 30 seconds before docking. At that point, it means that any aborts that have to be done, that means that at that point, any aborts to the docking procedure will have to be done automatically by Dragon.
And then it is the moment we've all been waiting for, besides launch today, obviously. When our crew arrives at the space station, Dragon will fly in and make contact with the International Docking Adapter, giving us what we call soft capture, so the work isn't done yet. The soft capture ring then retracts until sensors indicate it's time for 12 hooks to drive in place and give us a hard capture, firmly securing Dragon to its new home on the space station. Meanwhile, the space station crew, namely Chris Cassidy, will manually pressurize the vestibule, which is the area between the Dragon hatch and the station hatch, and power, audio, and data connections will be established from the station to Dragon. Then it's time for leak checks and hatch opening, which is currently timelined to come about 2 hours following docking.
Okay, good to know. And a little fun fact for all of you out there. Now, prior to the installation of the International Docking Adapter, or IDA, as you may have read about it, this port is also where space shuttles used to dock on the station as well. So, like I said before, Doug Hurley, spacecraft commander on board Dragon today, was the pilot of the very last space shuttle mission. That shuttle docked to the very same place that Crew Dragon will be docking tomorrow morning. That means that Doug, who was one of the last astronauts to depart the International Space Station via shuttle, will actually be opening up the very same hatch he closed nearly a decade ago. I just think about that and my heart rate starts going up again. So like we have seen, Crew Dragon has a very busy morning ahead, evening and busy. But even in space, it takes two to tango. The International Space Station is also a factor in the mix for this dance-like approach operation. And as you've heard me say before, it is a choreograph of many sorts. So that's why we've been going back and forth between Mission Control here in Hawthorne for updates, as well as Mission Control Houston for updates as well. On that note, do we have an update from perhaps Courtney Beasley over at Mission Control Houston?
Hey, Kate, we do indeed have an update. And again, it's such an exciting day, and I'm happy to be joining the two of you for coverage into the overnight hours from Johnson Space Center. Here in Mission Control Houston, the Orbit 3 team of flight controllers is on console today, led by Flight Director Rebecca Wingfield. Flight controllers here in Houston are continuing to alternate the flight control rooms they are using from shift to prevent contact between the members of one shift to the next. At this hour, the International Space Station crew is asleep. The trio, NASA astronaut and station commander Chris Cassidy and Roscosmos cosmonauts Anatoly Ivanishin and Ivan Wagner, went to sleep around 4:30 p.m. Central Time. They'll continue that sleep period until just about 1 a.m. Central Time on Sunday morning, ready to begin an exciting day of work. Then around 5:35 a.m. Central Time, Cassidy has a rendezvous conference with ground controllers to review rendezvous procedures that the Crew Dragon crew will be executing later in the morning. He will then move on to begin setting up tools that will be used for leak checks between the space station and Crew Dragon after docking, as well as setting up photo TV equipment to capture the historic hatch opening later that day. And from there, Cassidy will move into his midday meal. Then around 8:25 a.m. Central Time, Cassidy will begin monitoring the approach of Crew Dragon. Again, another moment we've all been waiting for. He'll be in the cupola workstation on board the International Space Station as Crew Dragon begins its approach initiation burn to bring it below the station, then in front of the station for the final approach before docking. Once the hooks are driven to form a hard mate between Crew Dragon and the station, which is scheduled for 9:44 a.m. Central Time, Cassidy will then work in tandem with Bankin and Hurley to equalize pressure to ensure there's a tight seal between Crew Dragon and the International Space Station before they open the hatch to greet their new crew members who will become members of the Expedition 63 crew at the time they float through the station's Harmony module. And we continue to have all systems a go on the International Space Station. So back to Hawthorne for an update from you guys.
It does sound good over there, Courtney. Thanks so much for that update, and we'll come back to you shortly to see what else is going on the International Space Station. But in the meantime, let's learn a little bit more about our two astronauts aboard the Crew Dragon. Doug Hurley is the spacecraft commander for this mission. He previously flew on 2 space shuttle missions as the pilot on STS-127 and, as we've discussed, STS-135, the final space shuttle flight. Let's take a closer look at Doug Hurley.
Very excited. Yeah, very excited.
You feel ready? Feel pumped?
Oh yeah, I think we're ready. I think we're certainly ready.
Joining the SpaceX Demo 2 test. He is a Marine Corps colonel and test pilot. He was selected as an astronaut in 2000. He piloted Space Shuttle Endeavour and Atlantis for STS-135, the final space shuttle mission. Introducing NASA astronaut Doug Hurley.
It's a life-changing process in so many ways to fly into space. It's just overwhelming in some respects. Just the sensations, the rumbling, the shaking, the acceleration. When the engines shut off and you go from, in the case of the shuttle, you go from 3 Gs to 0 Gs instantaneously, and things start floating. And I remember distinctly just thinking, what just happened? To see a rocket launch in person is, it's a pretty emotional event. I remember the first time I saw a shuttle launch, and it was amazing. And then when I saw a shuttle launch with my wife on it, that is quite the emotional experience. My name is Doug Hurley, and I'm the spacecraft commander for the Demo 2 mission to the International Space Station. We are doing the first crewed flight for NASA and for SpaceX. So this is the test flight to prove end-to-end from launch to docking to ISS operations and then entry, descent, and landing. This will be the first time the Dragon had a crew on board, and so there's a myriad of objectives we want to achieve for this mission. SpaceX has been responsible for design and essentially making this vehicle what it is. What the astronauts bring to the table is the crew vehicle interface. What would work on orbit, what might not work on orbit, what would definitely work, to be able to just have the entire integrated team that's going to support us getting to and from space station, talking together, working through the challenges that simulators typically throw at you. It was really neat being part of it. It's just been an incredible undertaking to see where we've come just in the last 5 years that Bob and I have been a part of this, and to be, shortly flying to the International Space Station with the Crew Dragon. It overwhelms you to think about how many people have in some way, shape, or form touched this program and this vehicle to get us to this point. And you know, we are the lucky ones that get to fly it, but we certainly not for 1 second take for granted the amount of effort that so many other people had to put into this to make it successful.
For Doug personally, he's worked so hard, I mean, through his entire life, to get to where we are right now. As a test pilot, this would be the dream to fly a new vehicle. So it makes me so happy to see that he gets to be part of this mission, the spacecraft commander. I'm just glad to see his hard work and his dreams come true for that.
It's been a long road in a lot of ways for not only us, but certainly for all the folks that work in the Commercial Crew Program, as well as SpaceX, in our case, just working to get to this point. It's been a huge amount of sacrifice and time away from home, but the fruits of our labor are coming to fruition.
Now, sitting next to Doug Hurley inside of Dragon is NASA astronaut Bob Behnken. He is the Joint Operations Commander for Demo 2. Behnken previously flew on 2 shuttle missions, STS-123 and STS-130. And he also served a tour as Chief of the Astronaut Office. Here's more on the man who says testing out a brand new spacecraft is an astronaut's dream.
When you go through the launch day preparations, there's a lot of moments that kind of stand out to you. One is the kind of the celebratory piece of it, which is that you're walking out of the suit up room and getting in the vehicle that's going to take you to the launch pad. When you close the hatch, you know, that's really when Doug and I are in the vehicle and it's our vehicle, and you know, we're really in control of the mission at that point.
Test pilots, their task proved that man could fly into orbit around the Earth and return live and well to talk about it.
There's always a balance of managing risk as you go forward to execute a test point and figuring out a way to, you know, collect the data. We hear a sound. Okay, is that sound an expected sound? Or we see a light, is that light an expected light? What's the source of it? Does it sync up with something else that's going on or not? So trying to dissect all of that in real time in your head is, you know, a lot of things happen like that on launching of a vehicle.
From St. Anne, Missouri, he is an Air Force colonel and flight test engineer. He flew aboard Space Shuttle Endeavour twice. Introducing NASA astronaut Bob Behnken.
My career at NASA has kind of spanned a couple of decades at this point. I arrived with the class of 2000. Went through the training program, primarily focused on the Space Shuttle and the International Space Station, learning those systems. Having launched a couple times on vehicles, you know, the second time was definitely different than the first time. You can feel a little bit guilty of, hey, should I study one more thing? Or is there one more piece of information I should get? Am I really prepared or not? So that's definitely different between where I was on my first flight and where I'm at right now. It's been really interesting, I think, for both my wife and I to have gone through the process of seeing each other launch in space. I've seen her take that risk and had it be in front of